Lippity-doo. Hello, folks.
Didn't hear you.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Roger.
Howdy. Look like Mike Pence right there on my screen. I can see like there's this little spot on my screen. It looks like that fly that was on his head. That was the funniest thing ever. I kept thinking, oh my God, why did he just swat that thing away? Would that just not be vice presidential to swat a fly off your head?
No, but he had so much hairspray on there that the fly couldn't fly any longer.
He never felt it. That thing was stuck. It was like fly paper, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's still funny.
They don't do me like that. They hit up there and they slide right off.
What they call those touch and go landings, like they have on an aircraft carrier. They just come down, they boom, and they just
gone. Yeah.
Right on. Oh my gosh. Yes. How's your day been, everybody? Mitzi, how's your day been?
I haven't been having very good luck the past couple of days.
You have not had good luck the last couple of days?
No.
Sorry.
My portable oxygen machine went out on my way home from Radford.
Oh man.
On the interstate while I had a nosebleed.
Oh God.
And now I can't get a hold of this oxygen supplier to come and fix my machine or bring me tanks or something. So I'm stuck at home.
Who's your company?
Lincare.
Lincare? Yeah. I guess like Medi can do stuff like that, right? And, I mean, I think so. I don't know. But Lincare is that's the big dog right there. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. They give me I get my CPAP supplies and BiPAP, whatever it's called. I get that from them. Oh man.
Right.
They help me sleep at night. Oof. No snoring.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Do you
I've
have to wait till tomorrow to touch base or again?
I've already called them 4 times.
Oh.
Twice yesterday and twice today.
What do they say? Like what's their thing? Like, what reason do they give why they can't come take care of it?
Everything changed and it all goes through a switchboard now.
Hey, it is hard. Like, okay, even when you dial that like Radford number or whatever number, it kicks you national, doesn't it?
Yep.
I don't hate that. So you never get to talk I do not get to talk to anybody locally.
No.
So, okay. And then you hit like used to be able to, like, you could hit 0, right? Say, I want to talk to you. Just forget their numbers and just go to 0. They'll kick you out of the system.
Yeah.
Ugh. I'm sorry.
It's just frustrating. But I had a good.
Well, but you can't it's hard to rest and stuff though, right? Without your oxygen.
Oh, I have the one at home.
Okay. So it was your portable.
Yeah.
Okay. I got it.
But the one at home is making a funny noise. So I don't know.
Oh my God.
I have a backup tank, but
We'll
it's
have backup.
huge.
We'll have to do backup crossing fingers, crossing here, and we're going to do this. Okay.
Well, see, the thing of it is Thursday's the day that they come over here to Giles County anyway.
Oh, God. So you have, okay. I wonder, do they do live chat like on their sites?
No.
That's
You
not
just
right
get
either.
a phone number.
They make enough money. They should have something like that. They're not losing during COVID. They're not.
Oh, I've been around and around with these oxygen suppliers around here.
Well, I'm sorry, because I'm sure it is frustrating. Yeah, I'm sure.
It's just scary yesterday coming from Radford on 81 and
Right.
my machine's failing and I can't get my nose to stop bleeding.
So did you just pull over?
Nope, couldn't get over. It was during traffic time.
Oh,
It was just.
So
but I made it home and Gina met me at the door with my oxygen and
right.
everything was fine.
And a towel.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm glad you got home. That's good. Right. Hello, Jean. Hello, Gail.
Hello.
Howdy do. Hello, Cindy.
Hello, Roger. How are you?
Hey, you remember when I saw you the last time I saw you? What do you remember what I was wearing?
No.
I have it on, ding dong. We just talked about 5 minutes ago. Come on.
Oh, you weren't talking to me. I didn't know.
Oh, okay. All right. Yes. That was true, wasn't it? Okay, I'm sorry. But I was
Deep in thought.
I was big deep in thought. That's right. Yes. Well, how's this? Have you had any good seafood yet? You two?
Oh my goodness, yes.
I just want to well, the rest of us will just have to hear what it was. So I'm like, okay, so places like what is like the COVID down there? Like what is COVID like right now? And like going out to like say like a restaurant or something. What do y'all have to? So what's it like? Are they open?
We had friends in last night, and I did a seafood boil with fresh shrimp in the oven.
Okay, that sounds good.
Mussels. We had mussels as an appetizer.
So you're staying away from like dining in dining out like inside and stuff like that, right?
Tonight we did go down to a restaurant that we're familiar with, and they have an outside dining court.
Okay, good. Okay, all right. But yeah, I mean, just
That's all. We've stayed here and entertained our friends and
right.
sat on the beach and.
But don't let your guard down. Don't let your guard down. I mean, I'm waiting to see. Go ahead.
We wear a mask everywhere we go.
Way to go. We're having more cases in the school system over here right now, where it's it's going down at tech and places. Those numbers are coming up. We're having more cases within this, and we don't know if it's a student or if it's a staff member. They don't tell us that kind of information, but there are more cases. But still, we haven't had a report at the high school. Knock on wood. You've had Eastmont. We've had Christiansburg's had several. Christiansburg Primary, Christiansburg High School, I think, was today. We've had at Reiner, Auburn has done their thing. Gilbert Lakes has had 2 times. And then I think Margaret MES, Margaret Beeks, right? Would that be Margaret Beeks? BES. They've had them. So yeah, it's we've had a little bit of an increase, but it's still not, we're thankful that the school systems are not what they thought of. Maybe they were hoping where they might be super spreader type things. So it's good news for the kids. And it bodes well for maybe the future once we get through this. But it's not going to happen before we get through winter. We know that. So I was want to see if Mom was going to come on here. I don't know if Cindy was able to get a hold of her or not on that and let her know. Remind her. She asked me to remind her. So
I sent her a text.
Yeah, you might want to call her too and see about that. And because I probably would have been the best way for her. I should have suggested that. But we'll get started, okay, on this. And so we're going to start with prayer, okay? And I'll ask you to join me. God, thank you for another good day, at least on my end. I heard Mitzi's frustration with trying to get her oxygen stuff settled and all that. And I pray that that frustration would not grow deeper, but that it would, tomorrow would be a day of resolution and finding ways to not only get the mobile unit taken care of, but with the machine making its noise at home and stuff like that is not something that turns into a greater problem. We're grateful for a safe return from Radford in spite of the things that were going on in the car. I'm grateful for the idea that we can still enjoy ourselves in many ways at this time in our history, that it generally comes from friends and family and the ability to gather with those that we know are safe, especially in our homes with people we love. So we give you thanks for that ability still. And we ask you to bless our friends and families and keep them safe. For those that go around them and that are out in our communities, the students in our schools and all, May they continue to be safe and well and to look out for one another the best that we can. Bless our study tonight. And may the things that we do as we close with chapter 3 here, God, may the things that we consider, the things that we think about, may they be initiated by our love for this word from you and also the spirit that you give to us to guide us and direct us as we seek to study you. This I ask in your son's name. Amen. All right. So Habakkuk 3 is where we are. And so this, as I was reading this, it's a wonderful poem. I mean, it really is. I don't know if you've read it yet, but it is a wonderful poem. And the things that I learned about it was that, I mean, this is an ancient poem, most likely, okay? It's not a new poem. It actually comes from a time centuries before in Israel's literature, right? It's ancient, but it goes with like Isaiah and even before that into like Exodus type of poetry with the way it describes God and God's and everything. So, hold on. I'm sorry. We got something here from Cindy. She's telling me something. Oh, okay. So, Mom forgot it was Wednesday. Me too, Mom. That's right. She forgot it was Wednesday, so she just sat down to eat, which is what happened last time, fixed dinner. All right, so let me share this screen with you, okay? And we'll read through this. But it's a wonderful poem. A prayer of Habakkuk, the prophet, on Shig-il-Noth. And if I had better Hebrew skills, that would sound really, really good. Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord. Repeat them in our day. In our time, make them known. In wrath, remember mercy. God came from Teman, the Holy One from Mount Paran. His glory covered the heavens and his praise filled the earth. His splendor was like the sunrise. Rays flashed from his hand where his power was hidden. Plague went before him. Pestilence followed his steps. He stood and shook the earth. He looked and made the nations tremble. The ancient mountains crumbled and the age-old hills collapsed, but he marches on forever. We'll try to not screw this up. Here we go. Good. I saw the tents of Cushan in distress, the dwellings of Midian in anguish. Were you angry with the rivers, Lord? Was your wrath against the streams? Did you rage against the sea when you rode your horses and your chariots to victory? You uncovered your bow. You called for many arrows. You split the earth with rivers. The mountains saw you and writhed. Torrents of water swept by and the deep roared. You can't see it?
You see that? Can you also do that?
I can't help that.
It's just,
I know. Oh, I know it's there. She was telling me you can see this advertising and stuff, but it's Bible the Gateway, and it's the easiest way to do it. Thank you, though. Torrents of water swept by, the deep roared and lifted its waves on high. Sun and moon stood still in the heavens at the glint of your flying arrows, at the lightning of your flashing spear. In wrath you strode through the earth, and in anger you threshed the nations. You came out to deliver your people, to save your anointed one. You crushed the leader of the land of wickedness. You stripped him from head to foot. With his own spear, you pierced his head when his warriors came out to scatter us, gloating as though about to devour the wretched who were in hiding. You trampled the sea with your horses, churning the waters. I heard and my heart pounded. My lips quivered at the sound. Decay crept into my bones and my legs trembled. Yet I will wait patiently for the day of calamity to come on the nation invading us. Though the fig tree does not bud and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive oil crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God, my Savior. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to tread on the heights. That's good. And that is, and I want to talk a little bit more out there, but that's an awesome vision that he had there. And then there's also some beautiful prayer stuff as well. So I will tell you that this chapter 3, especially when 20th century scholarship, it was considered like a later edition. Okay, that it was not the same author. That when the editors, the people that finally put all the Old Testament together and looked at all the writings and things and the prophets and decided what was in and what was out and that kind of stuff, is that when they did this, that when they say that when they assembled like Habakkuk's material, okay, the things that were attributed to this prophet, and even before that, they say that, well, this was new. This came after the exile, after the chapter 1 and 2 events and all this, and this was put in later on that. But then now there's a strand that talks about that. And part of the reason is because, and I should say this, and why they say that. Because of the style, because it fits more of these Psalms that are later, okay? The way that they're written, this does not resemble, the style isn't like chapters 1 and 2. You even see the word Selah twice in this, that's inserted there. The word, the shiganoth, or note is probably the way it's pronounced in Hebrew, is probably a musical reference, okay? Maybe, and that's it, it's maybe. They don't know what it is based on just on the writings and stuff. And so they are the ones who study all the text, the little manuscripts that came about, that they're so fragile and come out of jars of clay, and all this stuff that comes out of the Dead Sea Scrolls and things that they have got to work with, right? The old text of the ancient Masoretes, they were the ones who put the Old Testament in its final form. They're the ones who actually decided which vowels they would use when they saw it, because it's a consonant-driven language. And so breathing marks and vowels were put in later when they got the writings. And so even doing that kind of work changes the meaning and changes context. And so they were very careful, I'm sure, to do it right. But there's always that, this is what you get, your not one jot, one tittle, not one iota will fall away. That's that kind of stuff. And so those breathing marks and vowels that they put in there when they were putting this stuff together, they weren't in there originally. These people had to decide what to do with it when they were putting it. And early grammar forms in Hebrew are different from later grammar forms of Hebrew. And so this one fits more like it seems to be more like a psalm, which are later compositions. And even the idea that you attribute a line to this, like at the end it said, this is written for the string musicians and all that, like the Psalms do, that this writing is so similar to that many scholars thought, well, this is a later edition. But it was still put in together for a reason as a whole. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't change the idea of the book of Habakkuk, okay, whether it was authored directly by the prophet or whatever. But now in times, there is a strand of people who will say no, because what it looks like is it's not later, but that this is an ancient Israelite victory poem, going back into Exodus, and talk about God subduing creation, subduing as they were headed into the promised land, and going before them and with them as they conquered the land, the promised land, so they could have it for their own. That it comes from that time. And so what the editors, in this vein of thinking, the editors decided, well, look, this fits what we're talking about in chapters 1 and 2, going back to 2 through 4, and then later 5 through 20, where it talks about the armies and the tyranny and how that's self-destructive, but then the hope that we can have earlier Habakkuk had about, no matter what's happening, we can trust and wait for God's response to injustice. Okay. And so within this, it's not that we have to decide it, but there's just some background about this. The thing that God has thunderstorm in this, was it comes as a thunderstorm, it's a really common ancient Near Eastern theme. And the tale goes like this, that God came as the thunderstorm and subdued the sea. And like the arrows that are coming from the quiver and the spears are the lightning bolts, right? And so it's this impressive imagery of this warrior God whose chariots come and trample the earth. and not only fighting and striving against people, but striving against chaos itself, nature. And we'll talk about some of those themes as we go through this. So I think that's some of the most I want to say about the idea of the intro piece to this, and then start talking about the actual thing itself. That first, it's described here as a prayer of Habakkuk, and most of the way that we see this in verse 2, this is the prayer. The prayer is verse 2, and so in this, he's saying, "I've heard of your fame," right? And talks about how awesome God is, which is kind of the way we go at prayer. So, Lord, thank you for so much. You have done this and all that. But then these last 3 lines of verse 2, depending on which, in newer translations like the NIV and the NRSV, the verbs in here are translated as like imperatives. They're like, we implore you, it's about something you're going to do. Do this, do this. Repeat them in our day. The NRSV has revive instead of repeat, or renew them in our day. In our time, make them known. In wrath, now we want you to remember mercy. But in older, more, and I'm talking about like Aramaic translations. So this is thousands of years ago translations. In Aramaic and Hebrew translations of this, that's not the tense that they use. It goes more with the idea of, and I have it here, where they're not imploring God to act, but it's the idea of that you made yourself in our time, instead of make yourself known. In our time, if you made yourself known, you remembered mercy. And I thought about Exodus from this past week when Moses pleaded with God, bargained with God, negotiated with God for him to remember that he is the one who had brought them out, that what he had done. Remember your deeds that you have done for us. You don't want to cut us loose now after you've done all this. It'll be like a waste. It gives our enemies a chance to boast about, oh, we have a weak and fickle God. And so I began to think about that a little bit as I read this. If it was like the old past tense kind of translation, but in here though, the newer ones, I want you to know it's about imploring God to act. That's the do something now, and then came this idea of the vision. And so, but before we talk about 3 through 15, it's that vision. And probably this may probably be the vision that he's told to record in chapter 2, verse 2, when he said, "I'll show you this and write this down so it can go out to all with the messengers and runners can take it out." That's probably the vision that it is, but it's wrapped around the prayer, right? And then it goes down into what we have in 16 through 19. And so in 16 through 19 of what we just read, the writer goes back and says, "I heard." That's the same verb that he uses here in verse 2 when he says, "Lord, I have heard of your fame." He says he uses that verb again. So this is the closing. But because in the introduction piece to this, what he was talking about, he's anticipating something. But in the last part, he's responding now to what he has. And so, and I've got a question I don't want to go away from here on this. And what he's anticipating is a theophany. And a theophany is, and there's several places in where we have theophanies in the Old Testament, but that God comes down and directly and is face to face with humanity in some way. Think of Isaiah's temple scene and the theophany that we have there when he gets his calling. When he's in the temple, and it means he's probably Isaiah was probably like a priest, and it was his time to serve in the temple. And it's such an experience that he has this vision of God coming down, and "Here I am, Lord," is what he ends up saying, right? "Oh, I have unclean tongue," and God takes the hot coal, and puts it on his tongue. That's a theophany, okay? The burning bush is a theophany that God comes to Moses in that. Those times when the cloud is there, right? And Moses goes into the tent, he's face to face. That's when God has come down. theophany there with Moses and the 10 Commandments, all of that stuff. That's what it is. And so this is a fearsome thing. It's filled with fear. It's also filled with awe that we have here. And so in 16 through 19, Habakkuk, the poet, is responding to what he's just seen in his vision as God has come down to him on this. And also with this, he, well, let's just leave it. It's a mixture of fear and all. Let's just leave it at that, because I think we can come off of that. But now starting in 3, okay, we'll revisit some of this. If starting in 3, this theophany is of God within history, but it's also of God within nature. Okay, and so I need to circle this question that I want to come back to that I wrote on here, and I want to save it for the end. Now, how much do you want to bet? Anybody want to take a bet that I will forget this question? Okay, let's take a bet, because I'm going to bet against me. All right. So history and within creation, God's acting in both places. And so this is just such a poetic thing. And I said earlier, it's about this warrior God, this soldier, and which is kind of like the picture of that we have of like the ultimate, and I'm not trying to use sex, but it's the ultimate man, right? This warrior, conquers everything, goes out and has victory, right? Our ultimate soldier. Jean-Claude Van Damme, right? Arnold Schwarzenegger, Terminator. That's the God that we have here in this. And so in my mind, and this is nowhere that I found a comment, I started immediately to contrast this image of this poem with the image that we see of God in Jesus. Not to contradict this image, because we have to wrestle with a warrior God. Okay, we have to wrestle with that image. And because we talk about, we want peace, we want to be at peace and all this stuff. But we're going to talk a little bit about the idea of oppression, how we actually get to overcoming oppression and in our world. But that I started to contrast that and say that, hey, man, there's just nowhere in here do I find this image of God within the image of God that we find in Jesus. And so that's where my mind went. And I wanted to share that because that's what I wrote that down. This God marches into battle, right? And he's got horses going before him. He's surrounded by his armies and all this. He's riding a chariot. He's driving horses forward. He has his own, he is an army. But the idea of what this would be, if we could see this as an old victory hymn for Israel and their battle, their armies, is that in around them, as they picture it, they see beyond, not only in their horses going forward and all this, that God is in presence, is who they're crediting for their victory. We didn't win this because we were just great, man. We just outfought them. But God was with us on this day. We hear that again and again throughout the. So in this is an ancient type hymn that we have here. He's got his bow. We talked about, right? Lightning bolts being the from the quiver, the spear, lightning bolts as arrows. He's brandishing a sword going through. You can imagine just slaying, going through the enemy. It says threshed, where it says, and what was it? That he threshed the nations. Thrashed them, man. Threshing is like that harvesting thing, like you threshing wheat. You're separating wheat and chaff and all that stuff and getting everything else so that the good stuff is left and the bad stuff you can burn. Think of Jesus' idea of judgment on that, right? The winnowing fork at hand. I thought of that image when I was reading this. It's powerful stuff. And so, again, giving credit for Israel's victories, but also that God's promise. There's a kind of a hopeful thing here, or a siding with that God will be with us in this thing. Then the second part of this I mentioned earlier was talking about not just within history as our victories within our army, that political imagery of we're winning battles and gaining land or gaining the promised land or just defending ourselves, but the idea that as a thunderstorm, God's to subdue the sea, that even within nature, that God is at work through nature, not just with it, but through nature that's there. And so trying to subdue nature even now, that kind of thing. The torrents of water swept by, the deep roared and lifted up its waves on high. The waves were even fighting against God, right? That's the image that we have. So the sea is fighting back, but that their theme here is that God subdues it, and like the thunderstorm, which was probably the scariest thing you could see. If you're out in the open in a thunderstorm, I mean, they weren't able to take shelter in a house like we do, or within our vehicles. I mean, when that thing came up, man, and they were out in the open, it was probably a terrifying thing. And so that's the imagery that we have here. Coming along is like a rolling storm cloud. Oh man. Do you ever look at, like, when it starts to get black up in the sky and it's rolling in, do you ever get kind of that sense of dread, you know? And one thing about living on Rose Road is that when those storms, man, they just get heavy going back over Craig County, coming up Clover Holler and going out into Craig County, and that lightning is flashing and it is booming. It's down there. It's hitting Gale and EE right in the head over there. I know it's coming down 42 on that. We talked about that. Okay. So before we start our actual discussion about the questions that I have here, let's look at one last thing. So in this, there's two kinds of literature. And I've mentioned this already, but you have Israel's old victory hymns. That's one, but there's another thing at work here. After Israel came back from exile, there were a lot of questions about how is God's justice work? How does God operate in our history? You know, because things still aren't right. We're still under somebody's thumb. They brought us back, Nehemiah, Ezra, the temple comes back, they find the scroll during Josiah's time before they go in exile again, but they're trying to do right. The reforms that were under Josiah, but they're trying to figure out what it is how is it that God comes about and brings justice? Well, that's when we get this thing called apocalyptic thought. Apocalypse comes into play now in their literature and in their thought, in their theology of God. And so what we probably see in this is that there's a great strand of post-exilic apocalypse here. And this ancient hymn is now they take this ancient hymn to talk about not only the victories of the past, but to say, this is a vision of the future. A future when, in the end times, God sets things right once and for all. That there is this cosmic reign of God that is inaugurated. That's what apocalyptic literature does. It talks about the end things, the last things, and how in the end, God's justice will rule and God's reign will be total cosmically all throughout. And there is no end to that reign. And so this poet is appropriating that kind of thought and uses it to make another point, besides the fact that how God works, like we saw in chapter 2, verses 5 through 20, when the writer was talking about how within these tyrannical regimes that rule over other nations, and we mentioned like colonialism, eventually they crumble from within. They're suicidal in a sense in what happens. Their violence actually ends up getting turned against them, or their oppressors can only take so much, and then they turn against them, and things begin to crumble. And so that was one thing that we can take. That's a historical thing. All empires come to an end. It's going to happen. We can see God's activity in that, especially these brutal regimes, and see that they come to an end, that people have enough. Okay. And maybe what's better takes its place, and maybe something worse takes its place, but they come to an end. But then also the hope that the writer had in chapter 2, verses 2 and 4, right before 5 through 20, right? That the promise that God acts, right? Let me say this: the hope and the trust, the righteous shall live by faith. Then we're going to, no matter what's happening, we're going to hold on, and we're going to believe, and we're going to trust that God's going to set things right. So it's that both of those thoughts are in here, but there's that apocalyptic strand that it's not looking good. When's it going to happen in this? So this no, don't do that. Stay here. Now, for us, that apocalyptic type thinking, especially Matthew, the 20, like 25 on in Matthew, 20, 25 and through there in Matthew, lots of apocalyptic stuff, end times things. But for us as Christians, we believe that the end times, the apocalypse, when things are set completely right, is at the second coming. That no matter how bad the world is right now, we give hope, we give voice to this idea that hey, yes, God is working to bring about God's righteousness and the ways to do away with oppression, to take care of the weak, to take care of the fringe, to take care of the widow and the orphan, to take care of those who were supposed to take care of. Yes, but it's not perfect. So it's not about, well, why does God allow this, that we hang our hat. We hang our hat on the idea that, hey, but even it may be long after I'm gone, but that there will be a day of reckoning for the wicked, that all things will be set right. That's apocalyptic. And for us, we look at that as the second coming. Think about the imagery of Revelation, right? And the New Jerusalem and all that. That's apocalyptic language, end time stuff. Paul has a little bit of apocalypse in there, but not a lot. His is about the Trump, very little in terms of that, a lot about practice, daily practice and church practice and how we should be as in the world. But that those things about the trump shall sound, the dead shall hear it, they're going to raise up, meet them in the clouds, that Thessalonians and stuff, that is apocalyptic stuff. And so that's what this author is throwing out there. Okay. Any questions? Any thoughts? Because I've got questions. That's a no. Crickets, man. Come on. I put you to sleep. Wake up. Wake up.
I'm awake.
All right, here we go. So I want to think about this idea of God as warrior and and us to grapple with this idea that, because, Old Testament has no qualm about war. I mean, war is used, God uses war in two different ways. Not only, and I thought about this in one of the things, in chapter 1, verses 5 through 11, God is riding with, this warrior is riding with the enemy coming to do punishment. Okay? And so there's this kind of ambiguity about God as warrior. God is on our side, bringing us to victory. But oh my gosh, God can go ride with the enemy too and bring judgment on us. So let's just talk about this idea of war. I don't know if you've ever heard of a thing called just war theory. It has like 6 points, and it's an ethical way. And like even they talked about this since World War II. Does a war meet this criteria? And people will use this in evaluation to decide on some, it's part of the idea of, should we go to war? Does it meet certain criteria to be a just war? Not just going to war for the sake of it or just to conquer land or something, but just war theory is about, is this a necessary evil that we need to do this? Is it, we're going to liberate people? Are we doing good with it? That kind of thing. Liberation theology uses some just war theory. And we heard liberation theology a lot in Central America, fighting when those regimes were being fought against the communist regimes and stuff, like in Nicaragua, El Salvador, where there was so much back, in the 60s, late 70s, early and through the 80s and stuff, how that was changing there, the banana republics, right? And so just war theory, liberation theology was like, hey man, the oppressors, we need to go to war. We need to liberate ourselves. So the United States is arming them. Oh, we're doing this the just way. And, and there's always we don't do things for perfect reasons. No, I don't think anybody does anything like that. But when we start talking about the vestiges of colonialism and all that stuff, we just do it differently sometimes. But so if we're backing people in their wars to fight for oppression, because remember, we were supplying Osama bin Laden and and his crew their weapons and stuff to fight against the Russians in Afghanistan. We remember that, right? And then we talk about Ollie North and Contra and Iran Contra and all these things that go on, all this stuff. But that, was that a just cause? Would a warrior God ride with that? And so I want to ask, do you think that is war ever justified? And if so, under what circumstances should we ride with warrior God in this world? That's my question. Is war, and maybe it's just simply, is war ever justified?
I think war has changed. It's not
Right.
fought like it used to be. Everything's different.
So let me ask this. So like the use of technology, whether it's drones or cyber stuff that we do, the idea of especially with the drones has changed it dramatically. The weapons that we have amassed versus what somebody else might have. But is it justified? No matter what it is, how it's changed, how it's waged, is it justified? That's what I want. Is it ever justified?
Not when physical life is lost. No,
Okay.
ever.
What do you say? This is a good debate if you want to have it. It's really cool. I like this kind of stuff because it's hard. It's hard to think about. I have struggled with it.
My dad was
You
in.
know,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Bev.
Okay. My dad was in World War II, and he would not talk about it after he got home.
Oh, wow.
And for years and years. And finally, I had the opportunity to take him and visit with some of his war buddies in the area. And it was wonderful just to sit and listen to what they did and what they went through. So based on those conversations, I would say war is not justified.
Okay. All right. And then, hey, where did your dad fight?
He was in Italy and Germany.
So he was in the mountains. Okay, first. Okay, that was nasty stuff.
Yes.
That was tough fighting. Yes, I've read about that stuff. That was tough fighting through there. Yeah.
He got
Okay.
shot in the arm, and he also had frozen feet, and sent back to England to recuperate, and finally back to the front line again. And finally, it was over with, and he got to come home. Thank God.
I remember, like Ralph Hutchison telling me things about being on about an LST, one of those, because he was in the Pacific, and so he was talking about his buddy Moosehead. He was the funniest man. And so anyway, but talking about, but he never would talk about the actual, he just said it was hard. You're landing on this out, you're young, you're whatever, you would say it was hard. It was just, you're afraid to put up your head. You're afraid he said it was terrifying. That's all I can remember saying, but he would talk about his friends, like the stuff that they did to one another was just amazing. Just, oh my God, what a prankster. But then Claude in the Battle of the Bulge, he got blown up. That's how his hand and everything was the way it was. He would not, young man would not say anything, but it does change him. And we didn't understand PTSD and stuff like that, like we do now, or know those images of it, what it does to their mental health and things like that. But, people say that was a just war because they were fighting to save the free world. And it was a real, in that at its core, it was to fight oppression and tyranny, because if Germany had gone, they would have oppressed, Hitler would have oppressed Europe like nobody's business. But it also gave rise and more power to Stalin and Russia and what they did to the Eastern Bloc, and what came out of this too, because they divided up the spoils to get their help and cooperation and the lives. And so it's bigger than, it's not pure. There's nothing pure about war, I guess, is what I would think. But I do have in the back of my mind that there are times to violently fight against something. But that's not what Jesus tells us, right? That's the thing. I don't get that. But I still, in my mind, I think there are things that we should pull somebody off of somebody, you know? And I'm talking about in a national sense. There's times to intervene with military stuff. And that's a real struggle.
Yeah, it really is.
And I don't know. And I don't think I'm right. And I don't think I'm wrong. I think I'm just struggling that, you know, but you know, people that have like, think about like EE in Vietnam, you know, in the Air Force, the things that you see there. In those wars, I talked to a guy, ran to a guy at food line, didn't have his mask on. And he came up in the line and he got up to the counter and he sat there and he said, dang, I forgot it again. And so whatever, we were talking, and I was like, I didn't even notice that the guy didn't have it on until we got, and I said, man, I come to the door all the time and do this. But he said, you know, he said, I believe that we should wear them, and I don't want to, but I just forget it. But he said, me and my buddies, my Vietnam buddies, he was talking about, he said, you know, we think one of the things we tell us is that, tell each other is that, you know, we're not going to get, if we've got through that, nothing, we tell ourselves nothing like this is going to take us out, but we know that it can, but that's what we say. But the people that have been through it, many of them, my Uncle Ralph was not a fan of just going to war. 21 years a Marine, 2 tours of Vietnam. My Uncle Dan, the same way. We were not there. He was in Thailand and Cambodia. He was in like rear area type stuff, but he was, you know, there was stuff all around him. And so those folks, that's why I worry about having people in charge of deciding if we go that don't have experience with the military or have knowledge of like a firsthand or close to it of what war does, because there's just only, it seems there's only victims in war on both sides, from what we're learning there. So we got to grapple with that. And as followers of Jesus, how do we appropriate with the idea that there might be times when to free people from oppression, that there will be, it doesn't come without struggle, and sometimes even violent struggle. I mean, the Civil War, brutal. World War I, brutal. Just heinous. Even Korea, you know, and what, you still got a divided country, but that was it a right cause? I think they should have fought communism. I mean, I won't fault that, because it was about despots. China, God, but we go to war with China, they will just decimate everything. There'll be nothing left if that war happens. And so we have to do it a different way. Mitzi says it's fought differently. And I think we're seeing that with all the cyber stuff and different things that we experience now. But all the victims that we have, germ warfare, we can do so much evil with that stuff. What, anything else? So you guys have outvoted me 2-1. So if it's up to us, we're not going to do it. We need to tell Morgan Griffith that, because he might be on a committee someday where he's helping decide that stuff. That's right. The other thing I have is this about talking about this God is thunderstorm stuff, and with what appears to us in our time right now is the ecological crisis that we see within our world, the ozone, and then how that changes the atmosphere, the melting ice, you know, the water levels rising because the icebergs are melting, what the temperature increases are doing to our ecological systems all around the world, and things like that. how, because we tend to think of God as being active in history, like the warrior God, or directing the paths and of men and women and to doing what God wants us to do, that acts in history. But is it possible we say acts of God when we're talking about insurance things or whatever, but we don't really mean that God made that happen. But what if? Israel saw, in their biblical thought was that God was active in nature, through nature. What do you think of that thought? How could we apply that or take it more seriously as we look at, like, I don't know if you want to I'll call it global warming. Okay. I think it's real, but if you don't, what do you make of the changes though that are documented, actual scientific changes in things like the atmosphere, the heating, and how things are warming and all the melting of the glaciers and the water levels and all that. How can we appropriate this kind of a nature God? Because it's biblical.
I think all these things that are happening are man has accelerated everything.
Right.
Nature goes through changes all the time, but we've accelerated it to a high rate.
Right. So here's the biblical image that God battles against other forces of nature that seek to bring chaos, that seek to overcome the created order of things. Okay. And like nature itself, like when God's going against the sea and all these things. I mean, are these images that we can use to help us to plead our case that yes, we do need to continue to work because we are battling nature, but God is helping us to battle nature, I guess maybe is the way to, and I'm trying to find words for it. Okay. This was something that came out of chapter 3, not something I've been pondering for long, but I thought about this in one of the questions and one of the commentary things that I read. It was talking about how, we should grapple more with the nature of God who comes through nature as well as works in history, that kind of thing. So that's why I'm asking. I want some help.
But don't you think the act of God having a son changed him? Just like I know my birth changed the way my dad was.
Right.
And it's like in the New Testament, there's not so much of the gloom and doom after Jesus was born.
That it's more about promise,
yeah,
hope.
yeah.
Okay. A good news, right?
It's like God is not interacting with man directly so much anymore.
Right.
He's letting us have our free will.
That's it's a part of Romans like that. And I'll let them have their head and they'll destroy themselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the book, yeah, in Paul's letter there. Well, that's what we talked about on the first night, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's the same discussion in this. And so, but in the sense of that, Habakkuk puts this out there, he doesn't backtrack on that thought. Even when he's talking about, we're talking about how God is acting in nature, or God is acting all around, or God may be riding with the enemy, but there we have these victory songs where God is with us to overcome. And it would have to be a righteous cause, right, to do that. And so, but this, we talked about it earlier, that God allows us that the consequences are real of our disobedience, of our not paying attention. And I think we can say, I guess we say is it not only applies to our human history, but it applies to the creation as the created order of things. And people like us, looking like St. Francis, other folks in Christian history, they would have no problem with saying that God was active because God reveals God's self also through nature and in natural things. Okay. But to say that God causes the Jamestown flood, I mean, to me, that's going too far. But to say that God gets when a flood comes, that God's trying to get our attention, hey man, you better control what you're doing with the waterways and things like that, because if you don't, you're going to get more people are going to die. Okay. Or that if you're trying to subdue, oh my gosh, like Louisiana, you build everything underwater essentially before you get there. That when the hurricane comes, okay, bad things are going to happen. You got to be smarter. And now these things are accelerating and changing. We're getting more of them. That you better start paying attention to help me, I guess is what I would say, that we need to work with God to help nature not be so chaotic, that we're working with God to overcome the chaos that I think is coming more and more, because it is getting more, whether it's wildfire type stuff, because of the droughts and things like that that's coming that are in different parts that didn't know it. The food that's going to be gone because we can't grow food in these places anymore. There's just things that I think that maybe it's going to help us that see that we're allies, that God is our ally in taking care of creation, not just the one who told us to go and do it, that we work alongside. Just like they had the warrior God in battle, we have God is also with us as we seek to be stewards of creation, that kind of stuff. I'm going to my last thing here. This is my question, the one I circled. I lose. I owe everybody $5 or something, $1. The complaint that he had, this poem is very dialogical. This whole section here is very dialogical, just like it was in chapter 1-2, where Habakkuk is in dialogue with God and they're back and forth. There's a lament or a prayer, then there's a response, there's a God, and then there's his response and all that. It's the same. That's another reason to say that this is part of the same body of work, because of that dialogue. It's very strong that way. That's on this. And so in this, though, he comes out, bad things are happening. And so, but he comes out at the end of this, believing that you look at it, he says, hey, but you know what? It may not be now, but I'm going to be patient. I must wait for the Lord to set things right. And so my question was, and in the middle of this, I thought I would ask you, what would shake you from your trust? Because earlier he's coming out before this, Habakkuk is coming out like he's about ready to be done, right? Too much is bad. I don't understand what's going on here, God. This doesn't seem right. So, and my thing is, what would shake you from your trust? You're waiting for God. If not you, can you think of things that has shaken other people's trust that you know, and what has moved them away from waiting or trusting on God's setting things right? And this will be our close.
Multi question, many answers to that.
Okay, give me something though.
Sometimes we think that death of a family member is an end result, but it's not.
Is it like the type of death though that makes us wonder?
Yeah, the type. That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking. Yeah. You're making me think of something. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was thinking about Marty Ferrier and just the whole Allen saga and the Huntingtons. That it always comes to my mind when I think of that kind of thing. And I look at Marty and I think, man, he just keeps going, man. He's always, to me, he's just, how do you do that? And I was thinking of, I was on a line, and Sydney's on this too. Another night and I haven't talked to her, directly in years. I got a half sister in Utah, and my brother and sister do. They're frequently, evidently. They don't talk to me about it, but they are. And so she just got out of the hospital, nearly died or whatever. But they lost her son when she's 2 years older than me, right at 2 years older. And but her son had Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, and he lived to be 21, which is like a long time for Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. But that, and then the marriage and this, and now she's had breast cancer, and it's tragic stuff. I think of Cindy's cousin, who has lost not one child, but two. And both of them should have been avoidable things, not on her part, but because of other people, right? That had happened, that both children had died for automobile stuff. And other things that that compounded, like what would make, I wonder if I had that kind of load on me, how would I respond? And I can think of one gentleman, I won't say his name out loud. This is because nobody here would know him. But when I was as a kid in church and he just walked away from the church, he said, I can't believe, and some things that happened. He said, I'm done. I'm done with God. I'm walking away. I deny it all. I don't believe there is one. And this was a man who was, for all appearances, just every day, he was part of the church. He was like our deacon type elder person. He was, would do Sunday school teach. And then he just said, I'm done with this. And it was a terrible thing that happened, but oh man. So it can happen. What would it take, I wonder, to break me and me to say, there's no way any of this is real. It's not a reality. I don't know. I don't know if there is something. Is that ever a question that you would ponder? Like, what would it take to knock you off your path with God?
Yeah, I've thought about that quite a bit. Seemed like though the more I get with things like death in my family, illness in my family,
And I know, and both of you have dealt with severe tragedy.
and that makes me stronger. I go the opposite way. I go toward God and ask him why. And then I realize I think he gives me an answer through the fact that he came to earth in his son Jesus, and he sent the Holy Spirit to give us strength. And I thank him for that, because that's what pulls me through.
Amen. Okay. Thank you for that. All right. Well, that's Habakkuk. I thought it was I wish you'd send me an email. I don't want to ask a question, but and not ask you to do that. I wish you'd send me an email to tell me what you what you liked about the book. Okay. Or anything that was interesting to you or prompted like further thinking or whatever. That's helpful for me to process, and it helps me with sermons, right? Because it lets me know where the minds of your minds are, maybe your hearts are in terms of things in your life. Because we can't get to everything in depth wise and stuff, but it's a big service to me and help to me, and to know like what you thought about it or whatever. And I realize that everybody, and I know that everybody's got thoughts, and not everybody's like me who will. I just like I can go, right? I can do it, and so I would like to. I would appreciate your thoughts on Habakkuk, and if there's something about Micah that you wanted to share as well. But I say that, like Bevan suggested weeks ago, that we just keep going through these little minor prophets and seeing if we can find some nuggets, because like that prayer I thought was beautiful. That verses. I thought that was just a really prayer. The vision is amazing in this. To me, that's my, of the parts in here, I think this is my favorite part of the book, those 3 chapters. It's not a big book, but I like this. I liked reading this the best. It was exciting. Even outside of the violence and stuff. I like this a lot. And where I liked where he comes down at the end. And maybe that's why I like it the most. Because no matter what happens, he says, I'm just going to stick it out.
I definitely agree with you. I like the positive ending of the like the Psalms. It's just wonderful to get that feeling that yes, things are going.
Right.
God is with us. In other words.
Yes. So, so I'll let you know, and we'll start with another one on. And I'm going to go through a couple of them. Like maybe it'll be Zephaniah. I don't know. Maybe we'll go to Nahum or Joel, because Joel I like because it's got that. I thought about Joel because of what's in Acts, where and it'll be written in the last days and all that stuff. That big quote in Acts for that. And I thought, well, why don't we just see the whole book of Joel and see what that's like? So if there's one though that you decide you want to, these minor prophets is what they're labeled. Let me know. Read a couple of them through. They're quick reads because like they're like Habakkuk. There's not more than 5 or 6 chapters on any of these small ones. Usually they're like 3 to 4. So read through something and see what you like and let me know. Let me know by, let's say by Sunday, and then so I can prepare whichever one we're doing. Okay.
Good. Thank you, Roger.
It's fun to me. It's fun. And today is oh my God, I'm so tired right now. I've been in this chair for all but an hour and a half today looking at this screen since 9 o'clock this morning. It's crazy. And I'm getting ready to stare at it for another 2 hours doing school stuff. So let's stop the share. All right. I see you guys. We lost Jean. I talked her out of here.
Thank you. These
Yes,
are,
Gail. Have a good evening. Okay.
these are not familiar chapters to me.
And you know what? I've read them, because you got to. You guys look at them when you're in seminary and all that stuff. But I've never studied Habakkuk. We pull those little quotes out and stuff. It's good. I like it a lot. Thank you. We'll keep going with it. All right. Well, Mitzi, I hope it comes out well tomorrow. I hope you get some good news and things will work out.
Thank you.
Yes.
I
All
really
right.
enjoy you giving the Hebrew translations and explaining it that way.
You like that?
Yeah, because I've always felt like there's stuff in there we don't know about, and that it's because of the translation.
Yeah, and that's and I had that reminded me tonight about what the Masoretes, that's the translators. I mean, they were the ones who put in the vowels, which you have a word that has the same consonants, but depending on which vowel you give it, it has a totally different meaning. And that these guys were
Right.
Yeah, they had to really be paying attention to what the writer was wanting to say, and trying to get out there. So, all
I
right,
enjoyed
good
that.
deal.
Thank you.
All right, well, keep having fun down there, you two, and enjoy it, and I pray for safety. All right, see you
See
again.
ya.
Thank
All
you, Roger. Appreciate it.
Take care.